Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our virtual event, Pay for College with Confidence, presented by Gary Sipos of College Cash Solutions. My name is Caroline, and I'm the Virtual Events Coordinator here at Make It Better Media Group. I will be behind the scenes helping to moderate today's event. If you have any technical questions, please feel free to reach out to me via the event chat located on the right side of the screen. We are also joined today by Patrick Reagan, Editorial Director of Make It Better Media Group. He will be moderating our Q&A session. Our Q&A portion will be after Gary's presentation. Please submit questions in the event chat on the right side of your screen. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Patrick, who will introduce Gary.
Thanks, Caroline. I'm Patrick Reagan, Editorial Director for Make It Better Media Group. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today, you're going to learn the secrets to reducing your college costs. Paying for college is expensive, as many parents know. The cost of attendance can range from $25,000 to $80,000 every single year, and a college degree investment is from $100,000 to over $320,000. Gary Sipos is a nationally recognized college cost reduction expert. He's appeared on ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, has spoken at the Harvard Business School, West Point, Stanford, and at the NASDAQ, and has written a book appropriately named College Cash Solutions. Mr. Sipos has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Marin Magazine, and Elite Advisor Magazine. He's the author of The 15 Biggest Tax Mistakes Costing Business Owners Millions, and co-author of Masters of Success with best-selling author and legendary business trainer Brian Tracy. Mr. Sipos is an accredited investment fiduciary who specializes in helping families and businesses optimize their financial processes. The financial process he's going to talk about today is how to reduce your college costs. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Gary Sipos. Gary, take it away.
All right, well, thank you, Patrick. And let me share my screen here and we'll get started. There we go. All right. Sweet. So what we're going to be doing today is talking about the secrets to reduce your college costs. And what we'll discuss is, how do you define college costs? Who's eligible, how to apply for aid, how your aid is calculated. That's the most important part, how the aid is calculated. Because once you know that, then you can configure your own estate and your own finances to fit those calculations. And that's the big trick right there. And then different options, financial tools that can help, when to start. And the answer is yesterday, or as soon as possible, and probably a whole lot more. So here we go. So I always like to start with, why do I do this? And so then the question that leads to there is, what is this? And it's really not a trick question. It's a car, but actually it's a little bit more than a car. Because this is where I used to live, believe it or not, when I was a freshman in college. So this was my home for my dad and myself, and you can see the cacti in the back there. So this is in Phoenix, Arizona. What a beautiful car! And so yeah, I was homeless. But then, and so this is my why. Why do I do this now? And this was sort of my life after college. So I attended various colleges like Stanford and a few others, and boy, did I, transfer from a car to doing other things. I designed what's called the Apache A-64 helicopter. So this gentleman here, General Honore, who from the U.S. Army, loves me. This is Buzz Aldrin at West Point. When I gave a little talk there, I got to introduce Buzz at West Point, and so that was quite an honor. Here I am at the NASDAQ. I started startups, and one of them got listed on the NASDAQ, so I got to ring the bell there. So that was a lot of fun. And it's at Harvard Business School, giving speeches and TV and the whole deal. And so, boy, what a life. But I remember where I came from, and there was me before college and me after college. And boy, those are two different me's, to say the least. I remember before college, applying for a job as a busboy, and they gently told me to leave quickly, not too gently, and probably because they said, you look like you're living in a car, and I was. So anyways, there was me before college and after college. And so that's why I do this now, because college just changed my life. and college, as you know, is pretty expensive. And I just feel bad when parents can't afford college. But there's many things that one can do to help afford college. And this is why I do what I do. And we'll find out those secrets. So this is probably the worst slide of the whole presentation. And it's the cost of attendance. So the cost of attendance is everything. It's books, room, board, tuition. Yeah, it's all the costs, even travel. And so you can get need-based aid for travel. So I recommend University of Hawaii because you get flights there and back. Just kidding. But anyways, yeah, so here it is. And Columbia University is $80,000. Stanford, yay, Stanford, 78. Harvard, 75. And, and some parents say, wow, 80, 70,000 bucks. Is that for 4 years? And I'm like, well, I hate to say it. No, that's each year. And so, boy, what a slide. But then, maybe like the UC Berkeley is 37,000 bucks ish. And a state school might be 30. And then we got good old College of Marin. And hold on a second here. And got it. And there we go. And so, yeah, College of Marin, a bargain basement of 3,000, or, Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, a great bang for the buck, 30,000 bucks. So there's your cost of attendance. That's all your costs. Your child essentially leaves in September, comes back in June. That's the cost of attendance, all the costs in between. All right. And as you know, there's the inflation rate, and then there's the college inflation rate. And the college inflation rate is much, much higher than the regular inflation rate. And that's why you're probably all here. All right. So how much aid is available? And there's about $181 billion of aid available, because, thank you to the taxpayers of America. Did anybody here pay taxes last year? Well, hopefully, probably all of you did. And so 181 billion of those tax dollars that went to DC get whipped around and come back to the colleges. And there's over 3,000 colleges in the United States of America, and they split that 181 billion. And so what I'm trying to do is get you back some of those taxes that you paid into your pocket. And then there's a bunch of tax deductions too, about $90 billion of those. And so now we're going to get into the details. So lesson number 1, and the first question is how many years does it take to get a 4-year degree, per the national average? It's sort of a trick question, but actually the answer is 5.5 years, which is sort of funny. It takes 5.5 years to get a 4-year degree. And why is that? Many people, when I ask in live audiences, I'll ask them and they'll say, well, can't get the classes, or leave for a summer job or something like that. But actually the first reason, or the top reason by far, is that it takes 5.5 years to get a 4-year degree is changing your major. So child, goes to school, takes some classes, and then calls you up and says, I hate my life. And actually what they're saying is I picked the wrong major. And then they have to start over again, per se, or take over a bunch of classes. And on national average, per I think it's Business Week magazine, it takes 5.5 years when you change your major, or adds another 1.5 years. So the big question is what can you do? Yeah, Business Week magazine had that statistic, and so the big thing is, what can you do to not change your major? To hit the major right the first time, and that's sort of tough because you have these 17, 18-year-olds graduating high school, and you're trying to figure out a life direction, and they're only teenagers. And so how do they know what they want to do for the rest of their lives? And that's sort of an overwhelming question. Well, one thing you should do is become best friends with your high school counselor, because let's see, 80,000 a year times 1.5 years, that's over $100,000 extra to go to school for 5.5 years. So I say become best friends with your high school counselor, because they want to put $100,000 in your pocket. And essentially, your goal is to try to get the right major in the right college the first time. So that's one thing. Another thing is I have a test that I give my clients, and it was developed by these applied psychologists at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And so these applied psychologists, they said, what can we do as really smart applied psychologists? Because they looked at this problem, they said, well, wow, it takes 5.5 years to get a 4-year degree, and what can we do to help them, stick the landing and pick the right major the first time and the right college? And they came up with a nice process. In this process, the kids log online, or the student does, and they answer 300 questions about their preferences. What's your favorite color? Do you like to ride a bike? All these psychology questions, because they're applied psychologists. And then at the end, they say, here's your values, and here's your goals from what you've answered. And they won't say one career, they'll give you a laundry list of careers. And so then the student takes that laundry list and puts it on a piece of paper that says intriguing, 2 columns, intriguing and not intriguing. And so they'll have all these careers on one column or the other. And then you look for trends. And the big step is you pick the top 5 most intriguing careers and you do informational interviews. And so during high school years, I recommend they go on a lot of informational interviews and then hopefully internships and get experience, because maybe, veterinarian is one of the top careers, but then they become the front desk person at a local veterinarian office at an internship, and they see a little puppy come in and it's got a broken leg and they can't handle it. So that's sort of good to know now. So anyways, so that's the goal there. And then once you get the career direction in mind, then you back up and say, okay, what major do I need to be? And then what colleges have those majors? And so that's sort of a really quick description of this process that MIT came up with. And the kids that did this would graduate in 4.2 years. And the 0.2 was just couldn't get the classes during college. And so that's a lot better than 1.5 years. And so I recommend doing that MIT process, and also, and coupled with that, become best friends with your high school counselor. So there it is. So that's the trick number 1, is pick the right major the first time. All right, lesson number 2. If you're in the Western United States, there's this concept called witchy-wooey. What a funny name. Western Undergrad Exchange. You go to witchy.edu, and there it's just Western schools, and it's public schools, and it's not every public school. But let's just say you're in California and you want to go to a public school in Oregon. If they're a part of this Western Undergrad Exchange program, the most they can charge you is 150% of in-state tuition for out-of-state students. So if you're going to a public school out of state and you live in the Western region of the United States, look to see if there's a witchy-wooey class. So that's lesson number 2. All right. And then just one thing is when you apply to the school for admissions, you have to check a box that says, hey, I want the witchy-wooey rate. So there you go. All right, enough on that. Lesson number 2. Next lesson number 3, SAT versus ACT. And so everybody knows that the schools, the COVID year was sort of messed up because people couldn't even take, or kids couldn't even take the SAT or ACT. But now we're starting to get back to it, and kids are taking the SAT, ACT once again. And the Department of Admissions, of course, uses the SAT and ACT to help with admissions. But the financial aid department uses the SAT and ACT even more than the admissions department in giving out aid. So the higher you score in the SAT or the higher you score on the ACT will put more money in your pocket. So you can get a return on investment, by taking those prep classes at Kaplan or Compass or any of those places, or even a private tutor. You can get a return on investment, because if you do increase your score, you can put more money in your pocket by getting more scholarships and grants. And so, and then in the past, some colleges used, either the SAT or the ACT, but that's not true anymore. They'll take either one. Every college in the United States will take either one without prejudice towards one or the other. So what you have to do is figure out which one, which your student, which brain they have. They have more of an ACT brain or an SAT brain. And then once you figure that out, I say, forget the other. So don't take both. I say, so focus your efforts on the one test that you're more naturally attuned to and forget the other. Because if you take both, well, I say that's cruel and unusual punishment, and it's unconstitutional. So that's my opinion. And so figure out which test you're more attuned to, and put all your energy into that one test. and hopefully you do it one and done and score as high as possible. And the higher you score, the more free money you get. That's the bottom line. So the Department of Financial Aid at each school will look at your scores. And so then there's a comparison test that I have that I give to my clients. And you take it online, and then it will tell you a couple things. One will tell you, are you an ACT student or brain or an SAT brain? Which one are you more adapted for? And then once you know that, then it will tell you where your strengths and weaknesses are within that test. So let's just say that, you're an ACT brain, and on the math, you got all the parallelogram questions correct, but, what is it? Fractions, you messed up. So then you could say, all right, how does the ACT test for fractions? And, or something more difficult than that. But, and then it will show you what a fraction question looks like, and then how to answer the fraction questions. And so that way you can laser focus your studying, as opposed to just getting one of those big fat books that say how to study for the SAT or how to study for the ACT, and you go to page 1 and there's 3,000 pages. That's a nightmare if you ask me. So taking one of these tests, there's also a test that Kaplan called captest.com. You can find one of those comparison tests, and then also I have it too for my clients. All right. So if there's one equation that you're going to want to remember, it's this one right here: COA minus EFC equals your award, because this is the equation of how they figure out how much scholarships and grants they're going to give you. Now, I will warn you, Congress is thinking, they said they were going to change this equation, and then now they're backing up on that. So right now there's a state of flux, but right now this is the equation, and but we'll see what happens, over the next year, 2 or 3, how much they modify this. So I'm giving you the current information as of today, and we'll see how much of this changes. But here's the equation: cost of attendance minus EFC equals award, and or COA. And so that's all I'll say about this, and I'll move on to the next slide. Just kidding. What does all this mean? And because this is the most important equation, because you can configure yourself to fix it. So COA was that very first slide that I showed you that had all the bottom line prices. Columbia was 80,000, Stanford was 78, and Harvard 75, and College of Marin 3,000. So that's cost of attendance, and that includes everything: tuition, books, room, board, all your college costs, and that's cost of attendance. All right. And every single school has a different cost of attendance, of course. And then there's this EFC, and these are your EFC means for expected family contribution. It's what the government expects your family to contribute to college. And this equation is very nonsensical and nonlinear, and it's based on all these different things. It's based on, how old are your parents? What's your parents' income? What's the student's income? How many kids are there in the family? Your assets, but not necessarily how much assets you have, but it's more important is where your assets are at. So some assets over here will hit this equation really hard and make it a big EFC, and other assets and other locations don't hit it at all, are shielded, and they don't count towards this EFC equation. So of course you want to push your assets, into the 0 column as opposed to the big column. And there's all these factors that go into calculating the EFC. And like I said, it's nonlinear and nonsensical because it was created by Congress. But once you figure this out, you can figure out your award. So, let's just say the cost of attendance is $50,000 and you're, at this one specific school. And then your EFC is for all 3,000 schools. So you have the same EFC everywhere. And so your expected family contribution, let's just say, is 20. So 50 minus 20 is 30. There you go. Good at math. All right. So then you would get a $30,000 award. And that's how the financial aid officer figures it out. And so you want to design your finances to have the lowest EFC as possible. So there's the big trick. And and then the award is given in grants and scholarships and work study and student loans. And the financial aid officer at that specific school, he'll create your award package. There you go. All right. So that's how that equation works. That's the most important equation to know. All right. So where does the money come from? Like I said earlier, $181 billion goes from taxes from the federal government back to the schools. And then there's state, taxes, and they'll give grants and scholarships. And then the private colleges and universities, they'll have their own endowments. They'll give out scholarships and grants. And then there's private sources. And so the big question is, private source might be the Kiwanis Club or some sort of essay or whatever, you apply for these private scholarships. And are they worth it? And I say, not really. For one, it's only 2% of the aid. So, you want to go where the big bucks is at. And that's, in the financial aid system. And two, I would spend more of my time. It's a better bang for the buck to do ACT or SAT prep. You'll get more money that way than probably trying to, look for crumbs other places. But if you want to go like fishing for dollars, you can go to, for example, fastweb.com. That's, a private source. And that's one example. There's a bunch of them online. If you just Google scholarship, college scholarships, you'll find a bunch of websites that have that. But I would recommend I'd spend more of my time prepping for the ACT or SAT. You'd get more money that way. All right, enough of that. All right, so how do you apply for aid? You apply for aid using what's called the FAFSA, a really funny name, FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. And everybody, all 3,000 schools will use it, whether it's public or private, both of them want it. And you can't apply for federal loans, even if you don't fill out for one. So that's something to know. And then if it's done wrong or inconsistent, you get bumped, and it takes like 4 to 6 weeks to resubmit and get back into the colleges. And during that time, money can flow through your fingers and you don't even really realize it. So try to fill it out right the first time. And so when's the first date you can apply? And that's October 1st of your student's senior year in high school. And so that's, the starting gun. And you don't have to fill it out necessarily at first, within the first, I'd say 45 days after October 1st. If you do it within there, you'll be in the first group because they take it by sort of groups. And I think the first group is middle of November. So, if you filed it on October 1st or November 10th, you would still be in the first group. All right. But the Wall Street Journal says, schools award money on a first come, first served basis. So there's 3 buckets. I'm a financial aid officer. Let's just say there's a federal bucket, a state bucket, and then the college bucket, and they're full on October 1st. And then as that first batch comes out, they start giving out awards, and those buckets get lower and lower. And if they get too low, if you wait too long, so let's just say you wait until April or May, you'd be far back in line according to the Wall Street Journal. And maybe those buckets are so low that, let's just say you deserved a $25,000 package, they might give you a $10,000 package instead because they're sort of getting low on money or out of money. All right, so there you go. And then some colleges have prior deadlines, for early action and in November. And so, it's just good to get it done early. So that's just a big hint. All right, so there's the FAFSA, and then there's another form called CSS Profile, with CSS stands for College Scholarship Service. And the CSS is mainly for private schools. So if you just apply to public schools, fill out the FAFSA, you're done. But some private schools want the CSS Profile. All right. And it asks pretty much the same questions as the FAFSA, but then a few others, beyond it. And it's a little bit more detailed of assets and income, and a little bit different calculations too, and percentages. And here's the big note: just be consistent with the FAFSA. That's the big issue, because if you're inconsistent, even though they might be both accurate, they could get rejected by the financial aid officer, and then you got to start the process over again. And if those buckets are getting lower, you could, money could be flowing through your fingers and you don't really realize it. All right. And then here's the big thing about the FAFSA and the CSS Profile is if you use common sense, that can be a mistake. And the reason why is because the Department of Education codes that all this is based on doesn't make common sense. So, and you'll see how that works. Well, I'll explain one thing right now. So, for example, money in a child's name or a 529, but let's pick the child's name first. If a kid works really hard at McDonald's during the summer to save for college, he gets dinged really hard on the FAFSA on the CSS Profile, because they'll say, the student, little Johnny, Does he have any money? And you say, yeah, he saved $4,000 by working really hard in college for, and he's saving that money for college. Then the FAFSA and the CSS Profile is it's one of the worst ratios. Push up for that $4,000, the student's going to get dinged hard, and he's going to pay more for college because he saved for college. So does that make common sense? No, not at all. So then what I would have, you do is move that $4,000 out into a shielded account so that, your EFC is much lower and you still have that $4,000 to pay for college. All right. Or another one is 529. So believe it or not, 529s, I think of them, I don't like them for college savings personally, because they're a nice vehicle. They grow tax-free and they distribute tax-free. So that's the good news. That's great. I always love tax-free growth and tax-free distributions. The bad news is it's like a train, and you have a really nice drive or whatever train ride to your destination. But when you get to the destination, the train blows up and everybody dies. And that's sort of what happens with the 529. So when you finally get to college, you have this 529 plan, and they ask you, do you have on the FAFSA and the CSS Profile? Do you have a 529? Yes, I do. How much is in there? I have this much, and they ding you for it big time. They lower or no, your EFC gets bigger, which means you get a smaller reward. And as opposed to the family across the street that was not as responsible as somebody else that saved for college, and they'll get more scholarships and grants because they went to the bar every night and drank their paycheck away and didn't save for a 529. Yeah, there you go. So the drunken sailors get more aid because of the, so does that make common sense? Not really, but there it is. You should have drank a lot more. All right. Instead of saving on a 529. All right. And then there's those schools' own institutional forms. And let's see, some schools will have their own forms, and they'll ask similar questions to the CSS Profile and the FAFSA, and just be consistent. Because if you're inconsistent, then they can throw it all out and you're starting all over. And again, don't use common sense, follow the Department of Education codes and read the detail. All right. And a couple of additional forms that you also could see is if you have a small business, there's a supplement for business owners. And also, at least in California, I know that 11 out of every 10 marriages end in divorce. And so that was my big joke of the day. And so there's special circumstances for divorced parents. And we'll get into a little case study. All right. So the business owner case, how I got into this really before, I had some ideas of it, but I had this one company, couple that came through. Actually, what it was is I had a grandmother come in and I did some financial processes for her. She had all these different accounts, like an IRA and CDs and a Roth. And believe it or not, the process of you pulling out the money out of account 1 first or 2 and then 3 next, that order, or you change the order and pull it out of account 3 first and then 2 or 1, you'll have, your money will last longer in one way or another. And so that's called a financial process. And that's what I do. I do this mathematical analysis to figure out what's the best way to pull your money out. And then I help reduce capital gains and all sorts of financial processes like that. And college cost reduction, that's a financial process. And so I did this on her, and she, became my best friend, because I showed her how to make her money last much longer throughout her retirement. And then she said, I have these kids, and her kids were, in their 50s, and they had their own business. And she says, they seem to be doing well. The business seems to be doing really well financially, but my kids are stressed. So would you talk to them? So I did. And that was Ann and Jim, the daughter and, the daughter and the son-in-law, Ann and Jim. And Ann and Jim, unfortunately, the bad news is they had 3 daughters, and all 3 daughters were very smart. So that was the bad news. They had smart daughters, and they all attended Ivy League schools. All right. And I met Ann and Jim when their youngest daughter was a senior at Yale. And so amazing to get into Yale, but she did. And her other 2 sisters got into other Ivy Leagues. And so I met them after the 12th year of paying like $50,000. Back then it was only $50,000 a year. But if you can imagine your own checking account and paying $50,000 a year, every year for 12 years, you're going to be in big trouble by the time the 12th year rolls around. Whoops. Let me back up, previous. And so, so I looked at their scenario, and they were just a mess financially. Their home equity line of credit was maxed out. Their credit cards were maxed out. They had loans from the business that was maxed out, and they were just a financial mess. But here's the bad news. And the bad news was that they filled out the FAFSA and the CSS Profile and all these supplements and everything out every year. And they could have exempted their small business, and their biggest asset was their business. And there was a way to exempt their small business. They fit this one corner case, but they didn't know, because they just asked their CPA. They said, "How much is our business worth?" And the CPA said, this many millions of dollars. And so that's what they put down on the financial aid forms. And then of course the school will say, "Well, then we're giving you nothing." And so they paid $50,000 a year. But legally, and per the Department of Education codes, they could have exempted their small business because they fit this scenario. And then they would have received about $30,000 a year in scholarships and grants from all, so 30,000 times 12, if you multiply that out, that is a big number. And there it is. And so I didn't tell Ann and Jim that, because they were cooked already. So I didn't want to add salt to the wound that said, "Hey, you could have saved $30,000 a year times 12 years." But boy, did I sure learn when I started delving into this. And so then I started diving deeper and deeper and found all sorts of other things. And there's a whole bunch in the Department of Education codes, which is huge, and it's a bunch of legal government speak. But there's all sorts of strategies in there if you read the codes, which, it's amazing. I've been doing this for over a dozen years, and I'm still learning things every single day. And it's absolutely unreasonable that any parent would dig into this and figure it all out. It's ridiculous, but it is what it is. And so anyways, so it's possible to exempt your business. So for the EFC calculation, and unfortunately, Ann and Jim, if they, they're clients of mine now, and we're still digging them out from the hole they dug many years ago. All right. And this is from the New York Times. I saw this article, and it said it's a quote from a financial aid officer. And so one thing to know is parents and students sometimes forget that the financial aid officer works for the school, not for them. So they're all nice people, but it's sort of like going to the IRS and saying, "Hey, could you help me prepare my taxes?" They will help you prepare your taxes, but they probably won't, do the best job for you, because they work for the government, and their goal is really to get as much money for the government. And same thing with financial aid officer. They work for the school, not for the parents. So they're really nice people, but you don't want to go to them for help. All right. And this is the second scenario I'll go through. This is a divorced couple. And so here it is. We have this couple, and we got a man and a woman, and they get married. Yay. And then they have a little daughter. Yay. But unfortunately, they get divorced. So dad lives over here, and mom and the daughter live over someplace else. And so over here. And they share custody 51-49. So mom has the daughter just a little bit more, like a day or two more per year than dad. All right. And let's see, the child lives with, mom one more day or more a year. Dad, on his 1040 during the divorce decree, you can do this. He takes the tax deduction on his 1040. So mom, agreed to that, and great. So dad has it, the daughter exists on your dad's 1040 or his tax return only. And the divorce decree says that dad will pay 100% of college costs, all right? And dad also, they have some 529s, which I don't recommend, but they do. And dad owns 100% of the 529. So great. So now, and then mom remarries, so a new guy over here. But there's a prenup, and the prenup says the new husband, the new spouse, will not pay any college costs. But that's okay. She marries this guy anyways, because per the divorce decree, dad's going to pay 100% of college costs. So great. So here's the big question: whose financial aid information goes on the FAFSA? And I've seen it all. So some people say, it's only mom, and other people say, it's dad, and then other people say, well, it's mom and the new guy. And but there's a prenup that says not the new guy, and then. And then dad has the daughter on his 1040, and so it's dad, and then maybe it's everybody, it's the new guy and dad, and so what's the answer? And I've seen all of these answers, and there is one, And the real answer, I didn't put it on there. Let me back up. Sorry about that. The real answer is mom. Mom is the custodial parent. And because the child lives with her one more day per year. And so that's the definition of custodial parent. Where does a child live more often with which biological parent? And so then, but since she married this new guy, it's going to be the new guy's assets and income as well as mom's assets and income will be on it. And that's for most schools. There's 121 schools that will also look at biological dads in addition to moms and the new husbands. But that's 121 schools out of 3,000. So for a majority of schools, it would just be mom. And then if mom remarries, mom and the new guy, their income and assets. So that's whose information will go in the FAFSA and the CSS Profile and the institutional forms and all that. All right, there you go. So what do? I call this your circle of wealth. And the goal is to get your circle as big as possible over your lifetime. And so I am in the financial services, and most financial advisors work in the blue area here. And essentially, it's about rate of return. It's like, hey, my mutual funds are better than yours. Come to me because I can get you a higher rate of return. And that can be a good service. I don't focus on that much. And then there's lifestyle. And lifestyle is, let's just say you make $100,000 a year, but you're spending $200,000 a year. So then your circle of wealth will get smaller because you're not living within your means. And so those people, if they continue that up, I tend to fire them because I can't care more about their money than they do. And then the third one, so we look at that. But the third one is where I really focus. And this is, where I think people get the biggest bang for their buck. And that is, this is financial processes, or what it's called is unknown and unnecessary wealth transfers. So for example, college costs, there's one. If there's ways you can reduce your college costs and you don't take advantage of it, then you're unknowingly and unnecessarily transferring wealth out of your pocket. And, sort of like Ann and Jim, they didn't know they could exempt their business. So 30,000 times 12 is how much money they unnecessarily and unknowingly transferred out of their pockets. So and there's all sorts of different financial processes. There's like how to convert an IRA into a Roth without paying the conversion tax. There's how to eliminate capital gains. There's all these different financial processes that really can put lots of money in your pocket. And so that's where I focus on. And so we're talking about the one process called college cost reduction. So there you go. All right. So here's the next thing to be aware of. And that is once the financial aid officer gives you an award package, so there was EFC, cost of attendance minus expected family contribution equals award. And that award package, some schools will give you 100% of that award, but then some schools will give you, let's just say 30% or 60% or even 0%. And so it's really good to know before you apply to a school how generous that school is, because they might only give you on that equation COA minus EFC equals award. They might only give you half of that award, and other schools will give you 100%. So you might want to try to get schools with the highest possible award met. And then, so before you, in your junior year, a lot of times parents will go on tours, and you probably want to know this before you go on those tours, because your kid might fall in love with a school that is not generous at all. And so that's award net. And then the next thing is gift aid. And then out of that award, they'll give you either free money, which is gift aid, which is scholarships and grants, or money that is not quite free. And so that could be a student loan. You have to pay that back after college, or it could be work study, which is, a job on campus. And so some schools will give a whole, out of that award, let's just say they give 100% award, but it's 95% in self-help. Well, that's not great, because now you have lots of student loans and lots of work study, and very little free money. You want the highest as possible of award met and high as possible of gift aid. There you go. So, when I say no before applying and no before even visiting a school, to consider it. All right. So where do you find that information? You can go to Princeton Review or Big Future College Board or me. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm telling you generally right now these rules and strategies. of how to reduce your college costs. But what I'm going to invite you afterwards, and since you attended this, I'm going to waive the initial fee, and we'll meet probably for about 45 minutes to an hour at most. And I'll ask you a bunch of questions. I'll calculate your expected family contribution, your EFC, for the FAFSA and the CSS profile. And then I'll look to see if there's ways to reduce your EFC. And if I cannot help you at the end of my meeting, I'll let you know that I can't help you. But if I can, I'll let you know that too, and how much, and then we'll go from there. All right. So let's go through a case study because, whatever, there's a lot going on. And so I have an expensive school, the $50,000 cost of attending school, and then I have a second school that's a little bit cheaper. It's only $30,000. So I get the cheaper school and the more expensive school, and this is sticker price. And let's just say, your EFC is $10,000 at every school. So 50 minus 10, you would get an award package of 40. And then the second school, 30 minus 10, you get an award package of 20. So here's the question. Oops, before I show you that, here's the question, and it's a trick question. And that is, which school is cheaper for the parents? And the answer is you don't know yet, because you don't know what percentages these schools give of award match. So school A gives 100% of the award, and then school B gives 60% of the award. So instead of giving you $20,000, they'll give 60% of 20,000, which is 12. So they'll short you about $8,000. So which school is less expensive to the parent? And that is out of pocket at school is $10,000, because you're going to get a $40,000 package at school A. But school B, you'll pay the $10,000 EFC plus the $8,000 that they shorted you, because they're only going to give you an award of instead of 20, only 12. And so your out of pocket at school B is $18,000 versus 10 at the expensive school. So school A is actually cheaper. The $50,000 school is actually cheaper to the parent than school B. And that happens many times, or like locally here in the Bay Area, Stanford versus Berkeley. And Berkeley, actually Stanford could be cheaper than Berkeley, even though Berkeley is a state school and Stanford's a private school, an expensive private school. So I've seen that happen. All right, a lot actually. All right, so when you get this award package from the financial aid officer at each school, sometimes they miss awards. Usually they stick the landing, and they all have different percentages. Some, like I said, some schools are generous and others not so much, and they all have different, gift aid and student loans and work study, packages. But sometimes they miss their numbers. And when they do, and then some schools will try to compete with others. And so what I like to say is, when you negotiate with them, if you know their numbers and know they missed their mark, you can negotiate with them. If you just call them up and say, hey, I would like another $10,000, they just sort of laugh and hang up the phone. But if you say, hey, you typically give 92% of gift aid, or award percentage with 86% in gift aid, and you calculate the numbers, then they know that you know how their world works, and then they respond to that. So that's the way to negotiate with a financial aid officer. Otherwise, they sort of laugh and just hang up the phone, and they'll say, like, we've had record admissions and all that kind of good stuff. All right. So yes, you can negotiate with the financial aid officer. Just make sure you use their vocabulary and use their numbers against them. And according to the Department of Education, there's 3 types of family types. There's really low income, maybe they rent and they don't have much savings. So for those people, just fill out the forms, you'll do well. You really don't need me. Then there's the middle class who really does need me. So maybe they own a home, or they have a 529 plan, or God forbid, they have an UTMA, Uniform Transfer to Minors Act. That's money in the kid's name, or a rental property or something like that. They own a business, or grandparents. Yeah, this is funny. If a grandparent has a 529 plan, that really murders your EFC. And so there's strategies of how to fix that. But boy, if the grandparent takes money out of the 529 and sends it to the school, which is what a 529 is for, that's going to blow away your scholarships and grants at the worst ratio. So those evil grandparents helping out with college. So these people I really help out well. And then, and then the third class is like the super wealthy. And for them, there's all sorts of advanced tax strategies that we can do. Like, for example, if they have a small business, we can restructure their business as a C and then use retained earnings and pay for college, with the company assets that are tax deductible. And there's ways to do that. So, so these are the three classes, and then the classes of people I can help, and that I do help. So, how do you lower your EFC? Because that's the name of the game. One is if you have real estate, whether it's a rental property or your primary home, there's only two valid ways to appraise your property, because they'll ask you on the CSS profile, do you own a home? How big is the mortgage? And then the trick question is what's your house worth? And one methodology is to use fair market value. So you ask a realtor or go to Zillow or something like that. And then the second way is you can use this national index multiplier, which is this federal way to appraise a property that makes no common sense at all. It's just crazy dumb. But it's a legal methodology per the Department of Education codes. And so a lot of times I use that because that'll value your house much lower than if you just use the fair market value. And so great, now you get more scholarships and grants. Another way is if you have rental real estate, you place that into a specially configured LLC, not just a generic LLC, but a specially configured one. And now your rental real estate is shielded, is gone, off of the books of the Department of Education. And then 529s, like I said, is like a train that when you finally get to your destination, you have a really nice train ride, but then it blows up. And the 529s, they work against you in that EFC formula. So what I'll do is I'll do the analysis and I'll say, okay, here's your 529, here's the penalty you'll get if you keep it. And then I'll say, now that's scenario one. And scenario two is, okay, we unwind it. And there's ways to minimize or avoid the penalties in certain situations. So, but whatever the penalties are, I say, okay, that's scenario two. And is that worse than keeping it? And we try to figure out which way is the best way to go. And then, of course, it's always the parent's decision which way to go. And, another one is transfer money out of the kids' names or the parents' names or other vehicles that are shielded. And yeah, income shift. Oh yeah, this is great. So this is the Gary 529, I call it. And so essentially, 529 straight up, is you have to earn money and pay tax on it first. And then you put the money in at gross tax-free and then comes out tax-free for college, but then it works against you in the financial aid formulas. So the Gary 529 is you hire your kids, and the kid has to have the student has to have a job and to fund a Roth. But your kid's tax bracket is essentially, if he makes like $12,000 a year or less, will be zero. So you put the money into that Roth tax-free, and then that money grows tax-free because that's how a Roth works. And then money coming out of a Roth is tax-free, and you can take money out of a Roth for college. That's one of the exemptions. So now you have tax-free money going in. It grows tax-free and it comes out tax-free, and the Roth is exempt and the student's name is exempt from the financial aid formulas. So so that's the Gary 529. That's a much better way to save for college than using a 529 that works against you. All right, and then there's just many other scenarios. I'm just touching on a few, depending on your personal situation. So at the end of this, I'll show you my website, and then there'll be a button that says contact us, and you can book a meeting. And when you book a meeting, we'll have this 45 minute to an hour meeting. I'll ask you a bunch of detailed questions about your situation, like how old you are, how many kids you have, what kind of colleges, etc. And then I'll figure out what your EFC is, and then more importantly, how much I can lower it. And then if I can't lower it, I'll let you know. But if I can, I'll let you know that too. And then we'll go from there. All right. So when to start? And the answer is, as soon as possible. Because then, like, for example, this is supposed to be a pregnant lady. And I did have a client came in that she was pregnant with twins. And grandma was next to the wife. And grandma says, I'm going to start 2 529s for my 2 grandkids that are coming out soon. And they'll be born soon. And boy, I gave her a quick education. She's like, great, let's do plan B. So I can be a nice grandma and not an evil one. All right. So essentially, the sooner you start, the better, and there's less unwinding or no unwinding or resetting past planning. I said mistakes, but unknown mistakes. Yeah. All right. So just a couple of myths of reality. My income's too high. I have a client that makes $1 million a year, and he, it's like a key and a lock. If I can get this, and this, and this working, and in fact, this one client of mine that makes $1 million a year, I got him scholarships and grants. It's great. I've also had clients come into me that only make $88,000 a year, and I couldn't help them at all. So it just depends on a lot of factors. Grades too low, they don't look at GPA. They look at SAT, ACT, but not grades when issuing scholarships and grants. The grades is just in the Department of Admissions. Some people say I have a home or rental properties. I can shield those. Aid's only for special groups. That's not true. It's based on your EFC. It's an easy and intuitive process, and that it is not easy or intuitive. It's nonsensical. Yeah, nonsensical. It's a fair process, not at all. Like I said, the drunken sailors across the street will get more money than you because you have a 529 plan. That's not fair. That's how it is. Financial aid officers will help to an extent, but not really. And it all makes common sense. No, it does. It's totally illogical. All right. So this is the big finish. What we have learned: know which colleges provide the most aid before applying. There are billions of dollars. That's right. Yeah, there's billions of dollars available through taxes. And let's see how we can get it to you. Witchy wooey, remember that if you're attending out-of-state public. Your high school counselor is your best friend and is trying to put at least $100,000 in your pocket. That's really nice of them. So pick the right major the first time. FAFSA and CSS Profile forms need to be error-free, so make sure they're consistent, and then don't use common sense when filling them out, because they don't, the rules to make you fit them perfectly don't make common sense. And financial aid is given out a first come, first serve, so get it done in the first 45 days after October 1st. You'll be in the first group. And just like buying a car, you can negotiate. If they give you an award that's not fair, use the ratios and talk to the financial aid officer using his vocabulary and his ratios, and then he'll deal with you fairly. But if you don't do that, then he'll just not deal with you fairly. Financial aid officers work for the schools, not for you. Education codes are really complicated. They're huge and lots of legalese. It's crazy. And so know how to configure your estate and submit your forms, submit the forms to FAFSA and CSS Profile in your best interest. There you go. And there's just lots of financial aid tools available to reshape your college costs. And and then there's the 2-year rule, which essentially means that your income, your tax returns are from 2 years earlier. Yeah, it's crazy. So that means start planning soon. Yeah. Waiting just makes it much more difficult. All right. So the next step, what I do is I'll invite you now for a 1-hour exploratory meeting. You can schedule a meeting at collegecashsolutions.com. And during that meeting, I'll ask you a bunch of questions specifically to you and your kids. And, I'll figure out your EFC and if there's any strategy that apply to you. And if there really isn't, then I'll let you know at the end of the meeting, but hopefully there is. And if there is, then I'll let you know that too. And you'll have a really good idea of how much I can help you reduce your college costs. And here's my website, collegecashsolutions.com. And I drew a little red arrow because on the right-hand side, it says book a meeting. So you just go to collegecashsolutions.com, click on book a meeting, and book an initial meeting. So there's that. And that's it. That's my last slide. I'm in Ross, California, in San Francisco Bay Area. But most of the time nowadays, with COVID, I've been meeting people via Zoom. But if you want to visit me in person, you can come to 5 Ross Common in Ross. And there's my phone number and my website. Book a meeting at there. So I am all done. There it is.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. That was fantastic. I watched this through the prism of a parent with 2 junior high age kids. So this is super helpful. And I'm rethinking their 529 plans for sure. So let's go to a couple audience questions. We've got a few minutes. So, and some of the questions may have been asked and then the answer came up during the presentation, so we can just reiterate if that's the case. The first question was, is there a link to that career assessment quiz, or is that done with a college counselor?
Yeah, so that MIT program, unfortunately, they sell it like in blocks of 100. And then, so I bought a block, I buy blocks of 100 at a time and then push them out. And so my clients have access to it. And during the free meeting, if that applies to you, I can just give you that, at that meeting. And yeah, so if you book a meeting with me, you can get access to it. There you go. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
The next question is taking the SAT financially helpful for transfer students, assuming they were unable to take the SAT because of COVID?
Right. So the SAT, ACT is mainly used during incoming freshmen. So transfer students, not so much. Transfer students, the financial aid department will mainly look at, your quote unquote SAT, ACT is your GPA from the other school. Yeah. So like if you're going to a 2-year school or something like that, they'll look at your GPA there and how you did in the courses there. So no, you don't need to take the SAT or ACT if you're a transfer.
Great. And then there were a couple questions on the scenario they presented about the divorced couple.
Oh yeah.
One question was, I heard one question was, I heard the 51% only mom on the FAFSA was going away. Is that correct? And then the other question related to that is, what if the custody agreement is 50-50?
Right. So yeah, I'll do the second one first. So if the custody agreement says 50-50, then, it's still, but in reality, the daughter stayed one more day with one parent versus the other, then you can see on the forms 51-49. Yeah. And so, you say in reality, she spent one more night with us than with the other biological parent. So that's how you can handle that. And then the first question is, and that was going away. That is, so yes, Congress is thinking of blowing that away in 2023, but then they're doing a head fake. So they said, we're going to do away with that. And then just recently they said, oh, well, maybe we'll reconsider that. And we're backing up on it and we're not going to implement it. So right now, so at the very beginning, I said, here's all the rules today. And, and then as the rules really change, I'll let you know and work with you. But right now that's the rule. And Congress did change that rule to be implemented in 2023. And that was about a year ago. And then just like within the last month, Congress has said, oops, wait a minute, we're probably not going to do that. And of course, Congress didn't say we will absolutely not do that. They said probably mushy, fuzzy language, we're not going to do it. So then we're all like, well, what are you going to do? Please be clear. So the answer is a definite maybe, sort of pregnant. Yeah. How do you like that?
Got it.
I'm sort of pregnant. Yeah. What does that mean?
Another question that you touched on this with the Roth idea, but if I do have a 529 plan that I'm contributing to regularly, should I stop that and transfer that money somewhere, leave it alone? I guess maybe it depends on personal situation, but
yeah, and that's the answer. So the real answer is this: do the exploratory meeting. I'm going to ask you questions about the 529, and then look at all your other assets and everything else. And then very quick at the end of that meeting, I'll stick the landing. And once in a blue moon, the correct answer is keep the 529. In fact, even contribute more to it. That's a rare answer, but once in a blue moon, I give that answer. And but then a lot of times I'm like, if we keep it, here's the penalty. When you hit the financial aid formulas for 4 years, you get penalized, every year you have it. And then, here's the advantage of dissolving it, and you'll pay, so a lot of times it's like, okay, you're going to pay $2,000 in fees and penalties to dissolve your 529, but you're going to save $8,000 a year in reduced college costs. So, 8 times 4 is 32. So do you want to save 32? Do you want to spend $3,000 to save $32,000, or do you want to, not save $32,000 and so usually people figure it out and like, yeah, I'll spend $3,000 to, I'll walk into the ATM every day and put in 3,000 and get back 32,000. So that's the analysis I do, and so I can't say which one's right for you until I ask you a whole bunch of questions, during that 45-minute meeting.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then we have one final audience question here. What happens if you have a rental property overseas?
Yeah, there's too many corner cases. I just can't answer it that globally. But essentially, I need to look at it and look at a bunch of scenarios, and then we'll see what to do with it. But yeah, there's so many options with that one. It's like, yeah, we just have to figure out which of the many different options is best for you on that one. Yeah. So I'm sorry for the broad, ambiguous answer on that one, but that's about as best I can do without knowing a whole, spending about 10 minutes asking, okay, what about this? And then I could say, all right, here's how it's going to hurt you or not. And here's the strategy to do to make it not hurt you at all. Yeah.
All right. So that's all the time we have for today. We are so grateful you were able to join us. And thanks again to Gary and Patrick and everyone who participated in our discussion. We would love to stay in touch. So if you have not done so already, please subscribe to the Better Letter and follow us on our social media accounts. I will send out a recording of this event tomorrow, along with the resources you need to stay connected to us and Gary. And if you're watching this as a recording on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. We upload new content regularly. Once again, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.
All right, thank you.